d'Esposito. That sounds like a fun dish. Like they do Spanish rice, a Spanish ziti. Let's jump right into it.
If you insist, my friend.
Sup, you beautiful
Hey.
Howdy.
Hi.
How's it going?
My name's Mason.
And I'm Jeremy. Welcome to Once Upon D20's Beginner's Course on Dungeoneering. Today, it's time. We're breaking down the fight, the important parts of it, what to take away from it, especially if you didn't sit through the whole thing. But why wouldn't you? It was amazing. Those guys were amazing.
It was pretty solid, but this is the beginner's guide to dungeoneering, and Jer and I are well aware that simply watching combat does not help you understand how it works, right? And even though we talked a fair amount about, how to create your characters and about some of the finer points of things, combat in D&D is overwhelming for, I would say, probably a good half of the people that play it, right? Not to mention those who have never played it before. So our hope today is to kind of go through the highlights, rules-wise, of this particular combat that we went through, and talk about the things that you can learn from it. This all being said, really quick before we get into it, for those of you who did not get to watch any of the combat, just going to kind of set the stage a little bit. This combat took place with the heroes being our cleric, Galdor Ruby Eye, our fighter Goteg, our wizard Iara, and then our rogue Phelan, right? So we have those four, and then we have a good quadrant of enemies as well, with a sort of witch hag type individual that Jer brewed up for us, a nice little cold witch, along with a huntsman and 2 will-o'-the-wisps. And these 8 individuals total combated one another in the ruins of an old temple or church.
And as the combat ensued, the heroes moving up on the abandoned church, temple place, not getting to go down the stairs to find out what else might be down there. That might be another session. But for now, they fought. Phelan and Galdor took out a couple of the will-o'-the-wisps. Goteg got the final blow on the huntsman crossbowman that was terrorizing them from a distance. And then Phelan got to sneak up, get up behind the witch, and get that final slash across her belly and blah! Took her down. Like a rogue is wont to do from time to time. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Finished her.
Yeah, Mortal Kombat and everything. It was a pretty clean fight as far as damage to player characters were concerned. I believe the only individual that went down was my boy Galdor, unless I'm mistaken.
You are correct.
Me. I went unconscious.
The healer tooketh down.
I'm the only one that got knocked out for a good night's sleep. I was one of the more durable individuals, which was why I was putting myself into harm's way, but still it probably was not the wisest decision, and there probably will be plenty of people that watch that if they have played D&D a fair amount and probably question the wisdom of that choice, which is fair. But all in all, solid fight.
It shows the versatility of a cleric, where a cleric can be the support healer, the cleric can be the damage dealer, which you also did very well. And the cleric can be the tank that walks in, shield up. Some of the hits land, a lot of the hits miss. And, sometimes you take some really bad vampiric touches and get slapped down. But again...
And a massive armor of Agathis, which we'll talk about.
We'll talk about that. Speaking of, starting out the fight... they went and they clashed. It was a good time. And then, that's a 14 and a 17.
With my bonus to AC because I'm of cover, My AC is 21, so both miss.
As you can see, the huntsman started firing on Phelan as Phelan was getting away, but because Phelan had positioned herself around a corner a little bit and gave herself half cover, all of a sudden almost got her, but missed. That +2 AC from cover can be the difference, and you have to make sure to position yourself when you're doing stuff to try and maximize your defense if you can.
Absolutely. A lot of people act as though positioning doesn't matter a ton in D&D, and I'll be honest, more often than not, it doesn't make a huge difference, right? If we're going off of the basic rules, no homebrew stuff, usually your positioning won't really make or break a moment. However, if you can get some cover, you can get some really solid aid in a moment that matters most, right?
It's not only +2 or +5 to AC, depending on whether you're half or 3/4 covered. It also gives you +2 or +5 to dexterity saves. Look it up, it's in the book!
And full cover makes it so you can't be targeted by things.
Bam.
Pressing on from that point, we run into our first ever instance of concentration in this fight. Alakazam.
Running in, you start conjuring these spirits. What do they look like?
I think they look like the ghostly ancestors of dwarves past, here in the halls of our fathers kind of vibe, since Galdor is that classic dwarf of dwarves.
In this particular instance, I was the one that busted it out first. Galdor casted Spirit Guardians, which is a lovely spell that summons the spirits of your ancestors, or a bunch of angry ghosts, or whatever you want to rule it as being. But whatever the case,
best cleric spell.
It's really good. Whatever the case, summons a bunch of friends, a bunch of intangible friends, who kind of help around you. In order for it to be maintained, you have to maintain concentration, which is a big deal. This is also where we run into the no 2 spells in 1 turn rule for the first time. Spirit Guardians is an action to cast. However, Galdor did have a number of bonus action spells that he could have casted if the rule was not there. But the rule is 1 spell per turn. So, Spirit Guardians means nothing else to do in the bonus action for Galdor.
Then, just a few seconds later, in battle time, Goteg starts swinging around at one of these will-o-wisps that are very, very fast. Their speed is their defense as much as anything else. So they're flying around and winking in and out of existence, and he's swinging, and he gets frustrated, and
18 to hit.
An 18 will just whiff underneath the speed of this thing. You can tell that it's very fast.
Wow. Okay. In that case, I think Goteg is getting pretty mad about that, so she's going to use action surge.
Action surge. All right. So pushing through, miss. Go ahead and roll two more attacks.
The third one was even worse. I rolled a 12. Let's see if I do any better, and I surely do not. I get a 17.
He goes for that action surge, but it still betrays him. But he still gets to try a second time to try to attack, as you can see. But it still frustrates him. Later on he gives it a good hit, but man, he has to work hard for it.
That's where action surge comes in, though, right? It gives you more opportunities than you would have had otherwise. Does not guarantee always that they will pay off, which is just a crying shame, but it's the honest truth. On to Counterspell, which Iara bust out pretty early in the fight, right? We were not far in before Iara first said no to the witch's magic.
And she's already pulling 3 more bolts of energy out. One of them she's going to lob at Yara, one she's going to lob at Goteg, and one she's going to lob at Galdor. So
then Yara will cast Counterspell.
Do you do anything in particular to shut it down?
So Yara is trained to recognize the beginnings of casting a spell, and so he, with some hand gestures and a shout, he attempts to counterspell.
Counterspell is a huge deal, particularly as you reach higher level play. Right, a lot of kind of the classic monsters that have been created by Wizards of the Coast that are stronger almost always have some kind of magic spell of some sort at their usage, right? And oftentimes their biggest punches are spells. So having someone with counterspell around, particularly as you and your group get stronger, really can be a make or break thing for the group on the whole.
When I rolled the dice for the Eldritch Blast that Yara counterspelled, not only did he catch 2 of them that were decently high damage, the third one was a crit. And so, unbeknownst to him, yes, he may have just counterspelled a cantrip. It was a 3-shot Eldritch Blast that would have devastated the party. And then we come up on Phelan's big sneak attack where she had just hidden away from getting shot at, and then just runs up on a will-o'-the-wisp and just gives it a quick and then dips back. And
since Phelan threw the dagger, she knows that that enemy on the other side of Goteg kind of has an idea that she's there, so she's going to come up to the side of Goteg, get right up into melee range, and grab another dagger and just stab at it while Goteg is right beside her.
Bam! Uses her teammate to make sure that she gets that sneak attack in, even though, she didn't have advantage. She wasn't sneaking up on this will-o'-wisp. She still got it in there.
It is important to note that sneak attack applies in one of 2 instances, right? If you have advantage, or if you have an enemy to the individual that you are attacking adjacent to them, right? Sometimes this gets misconstrued or misunderstood by first-time players, and people think that if there is someone adjacent, right, like if your buddy, the fighter, is right next to the bandit that you're about to shoot, some people think that that gives them advantage. That's not the way that sneak attack works. It's just if you do have advantage, you get sneak attack. And if you do have a friend next to someone, you get sneak attack, but no advantage.
And then Phelan, as soon as she gets in that stab, she pops a will-o'-wisp and then slips behind her dwarfen friend, whom might be a dwarf, but that dwarf is bigger than she is, and so using the halfling ability to snick.
I'll use my bonus action to try to hide behind the dwarf.
All right. trying to use Galdor as cover. Go ahead and use your...
I'm feeling 30. Very stealthy.
That's a 30. As you can see, again, kind of using cover to your advantage. For you to be able to actually hide, you have to have cover. And so, like with Phelan, the way that she was built, it was kind of built in that she could sneak around the group and just kind of be behind, and then dagger, short bow, whatever she needed to do to be able to get in that jab.
Not too long after this, we have our first instance of healing in this particular fight.
Galdor, I think, is also going to see how Goteg is doing, and since I'm right next to him, I'm going to do a quick first level Cure Wounds.
1d8 plus casting modifier plus 3 because of Life Cleric.
You will get 8 hit points back, Goteg.
This initial roll for healing wasn't the best healing roll that it could be. Goteg had taken quite a bit of damage at this point, and so really quick, I figured Galdor would go ahead and get him healed just a little. This is where, the Life Cleric's bonuses come into play, right? Get a little bit of extra hit points here where they would have been missed otherwise.
And then Yara, seeing an opportunity to catch a couple of enemies in a shatter, just...
Yara is going to pull out a dry stick from his materials pouch, snap it, and cast Shatter on the square between the tracker and the wisp.
As you can see, the thunder damage can avoid the friends, but still there's structures and things in the area that still get hurt, but it's not enough to really cause any damage or enough damage to crumble anything or endanger anybody else. But it still avoids friends and hurts enemies, and that's what you're going for with an evoker.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like, I've heard a lot of people advocate for evocation as a school of magic because of how useful it is, right? And because of how good it is at doing damage. And it is really good at all of that. But on top of that, let's also just talk about how cool of a moment it is. Like, imagine you're sending just like a wave of fire, right? And your friends look over and they're a little afraid, and then it just jukes your friends, right? And continues forward. It's an awesome, so tasty.
Very much that kind of almost martial artist kind of, using your key to change the direction, and instead of just an explosion of fireball, you can throw it and hit this one, weave over to this one, hit that one, and flavor it so that it's a little more juicy rather than just throw and explode. It's a fire snake, a salamander snaking through and biting somebody on the end, or flying in this phoenix that kind of flies in and then explodes on the far side, what have you.
Absolutely delicious.
Use
Absolutely
your
delicious.
spice pack.
Absolutely delicious.
Heward's handy spice pouch. Best
Salt Bay.
Focus.
Come on, camera. Now's not the time, camera.
I hate you too, Amazon camera. Da 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 da. All right.
Okay, so next up we have kind of two consecutive things in a row that are really quite good. Our fighter, Goteg, at one point decided to kind of prepare an action set up for an attack, which is really important, and we'll get to that in a second. But then ended up deciding to just go ahead and make an attack now.
What I was thinking of doing was to hang around Yara and then prepare an action, which is and tell me if this would work, within the rules. I was thinking that as soon as the blue-haired spellcaster in the graveyard tries to, actually, you know what? They'll probably use ranged, so never mind. Instead, I'm just gonna stick around here and attack the wisp.
That attack ended up being
A nat 20.
critical hit, as we've established before. Noah got to go ahead and roll twice as much damage as usual for his longsword attack, which in this particular instance didn't end up killing the enemy that he was targeting, right? Crits do not guarantee kills. If they did, boss fights would be a lot shorter than they are in D&D, right? Drastically shorter than they usually end up being. Preparing an action. In this particular instance, Noah ended up deciding against going with preparing an action. But nonetheless, there is like real tactical advantage to preparing an action in certain situations, right? Maybe you're getting as close as you can to an enemy, don't have any ranged attacks. You know that they're going to move up toward you. You can prepare an action so that once they do move up toward you or past you, you can attack them, right? There's all kinds of different opportunities to use preparing an attack. This just happened to be the first instance that those words were tossed out there.
After that critical hit, the will-o'-the-wisp is about to move, and then Galdor, literally no mathematical way. No, there's one mathematical way for it to survive this. So I'm going to go ahead and throw it. All right. So I failed. So now that I failed, there's no mathematical way for Galdor to roll low enough to not kill this thing. Galdor, how do your spirits tear this thing apart?
I think that one of the dwarven spirits, maybe Galdor's, great grandmother, reaches out and just closes a fist around the thing. And with little, sparkles of electricity shooting out of her hand, just crushes it. And it is gone.
And he gets the kill. And as you can see, he takes a moment and actually gets to describe, because he described the spirit guardians as his ancestors coming back to help and protect and fight with and for him. And all of a sudden, he's able to just with this little ball lightning that's flying around and being a little speedy little bastard.
Describing a kill is one of the best parts of D&D, right? Because it's this moment where you get a real payoff and get to really be the thing that you started playing this game with the hope of being, right? So many people play this game because they want to get to kind of fit into that role of the badass with the sword, right? Or they want to cast a fireball and just nuke all of their enemies. There's a real kind of sense of like
Catharsis.
excitement and empowerment. Yeah, catharsis. Yeah, absolutely. An important thing I think to keep in mind with these moments is that not everyone enjoys describing them a ton, right? I like it a lot. I really enjoy describing kind of the general combat when I'm playing. I really enjoy describing. But there are a fair number of people who maybe don't think as visually or who are just more soft-spoken. And in those moments, like the DMs can also definitely step in. This is a good opportunity for people to kind of feel one another out a little bit and act accordingly.
DMs and players should talk about that. That's one of those things that you kind of you express and make sure, hey, if the DM gives you an opportunity to describe stuff, you don't, if you're not comfortable with it, just make it simple and kind of toss the freedom back to the DM. And like earlier where the counterspell happened, do you do anything in particular to shut it down?
So Yara is trained to recognize the beginnings of casting a spell, and so he, with some hand gestures and a shout, he attempts to counterspell.
If you don't feel like evoking that imagery yourself, trusting the lead storyteller to do it is not a bad idea.
So I really enjoyed this moment. No pressure if it seems intimidating to you. Pressing on, we have a pretty important moment that comes not too long after this, right? There is an opportunity for Iara to cast Counterspell.
Seeing this happen is going to conjure another spell on Galdor. And she begins whispering this weird discordant chant. Do you have anything that you want to or can say about it?
I'm not sure if Yara's going to take the bait on this one. Should he, though?
I'm not gonna weigh in.
I will give you 5, 4.
Yara does not cast Counterspell.
Okay.
And the moment is presented to Iara, and then kind of a time limit is also given to them. Jer kind of said, all right, make a call, and kind of helped push things along. It is really easy to lose sight of this during D&D, because combat takes so long in reality.
Yeah,
right?
6 seconds gets protracted into 2 hours, right?
Exactly. And each round is 6 seconds, right? So your character's turn that they are taking is a 6-second moment. And so sometimes if people really kind of sit on their heels and aren't sure about what they're going to do, a fair number of dungeon masters will kind of put time constraints on that individual. And sometimes that can be a little frustrating as a player. Sometimes you'll feel like you're getting more pressure when you're already making a big decision. But do understand, this is just to kind of keep the game going, right? Like we said, these combats can take really long. And it both helps with verisimilitude. It helps it feel like this fast-moving fight if we can keep it going. And it also makes it so that other people who are present also still get to play, and we don't all just wait for a long time.
Time becomes very important when you're protracting time out like these battles do, where if you take 1 minute to do your whole turn, and then the person after you takes 5 minutes to do their turn, it feels a little rough. It feels a little siphoning of everybody else's investment for you to hog that time if you're not doing it effectively, if you're not actually pushing the story forward with what you're doing. If you're just if I do this, can I do this, and then go back and forth, it's stealing that time from everybody else around you. Being present, like Mason said, is considerate, just table etiquette in general. Knowing your character is all you have to do. Know what you can do, and then react when Galdor rushes in and he's up there. All right, I need to do this so that I can help Galdor do his thing, and I can shine, but Galdor shines too, and just giving and taking from everyone around you, making sure to give as much as you're taking.
And a lot of those who are listening and watching this particular video, hopefully will be, people who want to play D&D for the first time, people who have recently played D&D for the first time and want to learn. So if you need to take a little bit, it's totally understandable. All that we're trying to say is just, if it's a routine thing that the spotlight is on you for prolonged periods of time and not on others, maybe check that. Maybe watch out for that.
They're like dungeons. They'll sneak up on you.
Watch out for spotlight hogging out there.
Then, as the witch gets to go, she towards Galdor. Galdor, please make a wisdom save.
23.
I'm going to roll 7d6 because they are casting it at the only level that they can cast it at, 5th. And that dissonant whispers slams him hard enough that when he rolls his constitution save, it only hits a 7. He had to hit a 10 or better because it's the baseline DC for a concentration check. If it had been a lot more damage, it might have cranked it up to an 11 if she had done 22 damage, or 23, 12, it was 24 or 25, etc. so forth. But rolling that 7 kind of took away his buffer of annihilation around him, destruction, and it gave her a moment longer to live.
Which, a crying shame, because Spirit Guardians, as we've established, best cleric spells. That's what happens when you use concentration spells, Pressing forward, Phelan gets a lot of stuff done in this game. Phelan does quite a bit in this game.
That's partially because rogues have a lot to do.
Precisely. Rogues, like some other classes, like monks and things like that, have a very diverse kind of palette of choices for things to do with different parts of their action.
Phelan is going to charge straight ahead, both through Galdor and Gotek's space. Since I am a halfling, my halfling nimbleness allows me to move in without losing any movements.
Quickness.
Distance. And I can't tell if this bad guy is on top of a platform or not, but if it is, because I am a thief, second story work doesn't cost me any extra climbing speed, so I will get right up on him.
All right, so you run up. Those are steps. Those aren't like a full climb thing. But as you run out and around the corner, you are able to get the drop on him because he definitely can't see a 30.
Okay, then as I get up on him, I will attack with my dagger.
You do have you have advantage because you were hidden.
Okay, I wasn't sure, so I will roll one more time.
And you moved less than half your speed before that, so it didn't break your stealth. Bam! Sneak attack. Coming around that corner, you just kind of slide in and slash across his leg. He's in some pretty nice leathers, but not nice enough. And you just slash across and do 20 points of damage. Mean.
And then I have 5 more feet left. Not sure if this is, more of a melee or a range guy, but definitely don't want to be right by them. So with my bonus action, I'm going to disengage and move to the right one.
All right, disengaging, running in, slashing across, and just tucking and rolling out of melee with him.
And in this particular aspect of the combat, Phelan has the chance to sneak up on the huntsman. So move, attack, disengage, and then finish the movement, right? To get in, hit, get away safely. Which is like the thing that rogues are made to do really well, right? Like rogues are among the few classes that are really good at getting in close and getting out fast if they need to.
Then, as Galdor's moving around the board, he has to figure out, because he's got that dwarven problem of sometimes not being able to move as fast or as far as anybody else. But
let's see,
Yeah, I can
1,
handle the witch.
2, 3, 4.
you can measure with the measurement tool here, and it's got you.
That is true. That is true.
Oh.
I'm trying to think of is diagonal move kosher?
Diagonal move has the old. I play with the old 3.5 rules of first one's 5, second one's 10, third one's 15,
Cool.
etc.
Cool. Okay, sounds good. So in that case, I am going to move just right behind Yara, since I think that's about as close to the situation as I can get.
And then he gets himself in a better position to shoot that guiding bolt, because he knows that, all right, I can move this far diagonally and I can get far enough to be able to get that straight shot.
Yep. You gotta love a guiding bolt. It's not as good as Spirit Guardians, but it's really not that bad.
I mean, you're shooting a cannon. 46
Yeah.
cannon.
Yeah. And your friends get help from you afterwards as a result of it. It's not bad. Not bad at all.
Good risk, good reward.
Kind of going back to our spotlighting discussion earlier, we have another moment that pretty well kind of flows into that and relates to it. There comes a moment during combat in which Noah, the player who is playing Goteg, kind of asks the table for some general tactical advice really quick, for thoughts on what exactly he should do, where he should go, things like that. As you will note...
Goteg!
All right, go Tig.
Go Teg.
Yara and Phelan, do you want me to help out with the tracker, or would you, Galdor, would you prefer I come over and help you?
The witch hasn't really been touched very much, so there is that.
Yeah.
I
don't know.
Probably, if you stick with them, you guys might be able to finish the tracker faster, and then we could all hit the witch. Or you can come and we can just split evenly. But your call.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with the tracker, just so we can get them done quick.
We make sure this goes by pretty quickly, because again, in the actual combat, Goteg doesn't have the time to have a full war council, right? Time is moving on, spotlight equally shared, and so we press forward.
And when he asks for help, everybody else does their due diligence of either, I have an opinion, here it is, fast, or I don't have an opinion. Speaking of kind of the same concept of asking for help, when Yara has another opportunity to counterspell, seeing another spell being cast, has this moment of, should I, shouldn't I? And within the rules directly, as written, there are certain ways to handle that. I handled it a little bit differently and gave them a skill check with a higher difficulty that I thought would be fair. I made it 15 plus the spell's level, which was 5. So he had an opportunity. It was a DC 20, but it was possible to have hit it. It's kind of effervescence of shadow as she goes in and looks like she is going in to try, and she's casting a spell to try and do something very terrible to Galdor.
Would Yara be able to, from his knowledge of the arcane arts, understand what this spell was? At least get an inkling of it, how powerful it might be?
I will give you just a cursory Arcana check to try and identify it. It's going to be a little bit hard because it's right there in the moment, but you can try.
Sure. The 12.
A 12. It doesn't get super high, and so I still give him just a little bit of knowledge. It's necromantic, it's nasty looking, and he gets to make that decision himself whether or not they're going to use the spell.
Then Yara will cast Counterspell to attempt to cease it. That's a 7.
And then that actually ends up putting poor old Galdor at a little bit of risk when he gets slapped.
But what's a dwarvish cleric for if not to get beaten every once in a while, you know?
Soak up some damage.
Shortly after this,
Phelan is going to kind of quickly slide between Goteg's leg and just try to stab this thing right in the thigh.
which brings up an important aspect of many of the smaller races, such as halfling, gnomes, other things like that. These small individuals, these smaller species or races in D&D, have the ability to move into the same territory as others and kind of stand in that territory and then move out, right? A dwarf cannot share a square with another dwarf, really. A dwarf can, if the other dwarf is an ally, can move through, right? But cannot. Dwarves don't stack very well. But a dwarf and a halfling goes mighty fine together. And so as a result of this, Phelan is able to duck in, make the attack, duck out. What's up, Jer?
Nothing. I was being completely appropriate. Then Yara ends up coming in to help things out and position a lovely spell to blast it forward and take out this terrible huntsman. Not quite getting there, but it does still. He has the opportunity to just blast and ignore his friends because of sculpting spells. But in the angle that he was at,
he will cast Burning Hands on the tracker, first level.
All right, rock and roll. Go ahead and roll your damage dice.
Okay, that's 15 damage.
Obviously, he didn't really need to sculpt it around. He could just angle it over a little bit.
Watch where you're going with your AoE attacks, right? You can often position things so that you get what you're looking for without hurting others. If you're just a little conscientious, as it were. Next up, we have a moment in which Goteg decides to use...
All right. Well, first off, I'm going to take a second wind to gain 1d10 plus 5 hits back, or hit points. Let's see how I do there. Let's see here. That's 2, 7. I get back 7 hit points.
Second wind is basically kind of a firming up of resolve. You can go ahead and flavor it as they are actually healing for some reason.
I could do this all day.
Yeah, exactly. It's the Captain America kind of strapping on of the shield and regathering the self for another push, right? Goteg does this so that he can get another burst of health really quick so that he can stay in the fight with the huntsman. And upon doing so...
And then I'm going to attack the tracker. All right, and that's 17 on the first attack. All right, that's 12 damage.
All right, you come around on this guy. How would you like to try and take this guy out?
Ooh, I think that I'm gonna bring the longsword down on him and just like split the skull.
All right, so you you bring your sword around, and he's getting barbecued from one side, kind of crossbow in one hand, sword in the other, and he's getting toasted. He tries to block your attack as it comes in, and you just shatter his sword and right into his skull, and he is dropped.
A solid cleave straight down the center.
And then moving on to enemy tactics, I describe right here, she throws her hands out, and as she does, the ice in the hair starts to coat her body and go down to her fingertips, down her body and legs. And she begins to be coated in ice. She's using her action instead of attacking the heroes to armor up, kind of that same idea as the second wind, but she had to use her action and made sure to show that it was casting a spell and give that opportunity to, are you gonna stop me, no, all right, ice armor it is, baby.
I will say, if anyone watches this and knows what is happening there and wonders why Galdor is dumb enough to hit the witch after this, because I do hit the witch after this for a fair amount of damage. But I knew it was armor of Agathis. Mason knew it was armor of Agathis, but I thought it would just be a first level armor of Agathis. So I thought I would be getting hit for 5 hit points, and I was like, that's no big deal. I just got healed for more than that a second ago. But it was not. It was a level 5. Right? And so instead I take a solid 25 hit points of damage immediately. Thank you kindly, Jeremy.
Snookers.
Yeah, that was brutal. That was painful. So sometimes it pays off to not just attack, to not just be on the offensive, right? Do also keep in mind what resources you have, both to defend but also to counter, right? As is the case in this particular moment.
Then we move on to one of the clutchest things in the game, where Pheolin, being swift not only on foot but with her hands, runs up and just
Seeing him take that little bit of damage, Phelan is going to start running straight towards him. And as she does, she has her dagger in one hand, but she reaches behind herself and pulls out a potion of healing that she has. And as she's running, she just kind of flips off the lid with her thumb, one-handed, and get behind him. And with my bonus action with fast hands, I will use an object and give him a potion.
all right, so I'll even flavor it that you dagger out, just pop that thing, and just jump up on his back like you're riding a tauntaun and just plug his mouth. There's a lot of people who homebrew the idea of self-administering a potion as a bonus action, or even just administering potions as a bonus action generally. I disagree with it. I think the game is based around the idea that for most people, it takes a little bit of effort to pop that cork, actually chug it down, things to take effect, all of that. But for a thief who has the cunning action, fast hands, just takes care of it and then uses her action to keep on keeping on.
Which just goes to show rogues are capable of healing as well. Next up, let's go ahead and talk about flanking. For those of you who don't know about flanking for whatever reason, flanking is an optional rule in Dungeons & Dragons. There are plenty of D&D games that don't use flanking, and that's totally okay. In our particular instances, with me and Jer, we do use flanking. I know Jer has some special homebrew rules that he even uses on flanking. I don't know. Jared can speak for himself. In my particular instance, I do love kind of the tactics of a fight a little bit. And the more that I can do to reward players for being conscientious and intelligent for where they're placing themselves, the more I will do so, right? And flanking gives an opportunity for that. The base rules dictate, as far as flanking is concerned, that two individuals on the same team, must be on opposite sides of a single enemy, right? It could be diagonal, it could be side to side, it could be up and down, whatever the case. As long as you are opposite one another, right? It doesn't matter if one of you is diagonally above and to the left and one of you is below. Not a chance. Bam, bam, bam. You see what I mean? What this does is it makes it so that the individual attacking gets advantage on the attack, because the two of you are splitting the defense of the individual in between, which I think is really cool. So, in this particular instance, coming around opposite to Goteg.
How would you, Phelan, like to dispatch of this icy witch?
I'm just going to, seeing Galdor fall down, be like, no! And just reach behind me, pull out the short sword, and as I'm running right past her, just drag the sword across her.
We like flanking. You don't have to use it. But that's how it works.
But right before Phelan gets that final blow, the witch is able to get off one last strike. As you reach out and slam your hands into her, the ice around her breaks, and you also receive this reverberation of cold energy. You take 25 points of cold damage from the armor of Agathis. That does shatter from the damage that you do. Seeing how rough you're looking after that hit, she just grabs your hammer arm and just starts channeling lightning through it, and you feel it course through your whole body, going through your armor and your shield. And she just says, as she's driving you to the ground, she just says, "You're coming with me," which drops him to the ground, and it puts Galdor unconscious. The potion from before saved him from getting taken down by another hit, but this time he actually got put down, and that limited Phelan's options on her ability to help him out again, because she only had the one potion, not thinking Galdor also had a potion on him that she could have used, but that's okay. Getting knocked unconscious, specifically as the healer, can be suddenly and terribly crippling to an adventuring party. If this party were more than just this one shot, it could have affected their whole dynamic very poorly if something more had happened to their healer, which also kind of brings it around to, as the fight ended, there was this brief hesitation on Yara's part.
Yara will approach his comrade Galdor and carefully observe Galdor's struggle for life to see if it's worth using a healing potion or not. Maybe he'll just get better on his own. Yeah, he's gonna get the potion ready, and if it looks like Galdor's gonna go under, he'll use it, but only when it looks like Galdor will need it.
And they were hoping, of course, to save this 50 gold pieces of potion to be able to use it later. Again, thinking as a continuing adventuring party. But seeing things start to go south, all of a sudden Galdor convulses as he's not doing very well. Yara
will supply the healing potion,
which is okay. It's a utilitarian mindset rather than a sentimental mindset, which can be the approach that your character takes to resource management, and that is okay. It's an okay way to play, as long as everybody understands that. It's okay.
Give Yara's player a little bit of guff during this particular video, and honestly, it's completely understandable, the decision that the player makes, right? Healing potions are oftentimes pretty few and far between in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, and as Jer already established, pretty expensive, especially if you're an early on adventuring party, right? If all that you got from your last dungeon was 50 gold pieces, putting that toward a single potion is a big ask. And so it's understandable if people choose to use their resources in this fashion and wait until they're certain that the player character is not going to be able to take care of this themselves.
Though I do want to especially compliment John on his portrayal of Yara. Very high intelligence character. I think honestly would take things like that into account, where it's like, is this actually worth it right now? Can you know, trying to think tactically, think logically. Do I need to use this resource? Is this going to get better by itself? Are we going to be okay? And rather than just jumping into it, I think it was a genius maneuver. Again, yeah, gave him a little bit of guff about this, that, or the other. Honest to goodness, I think he played a great character. So.
Absolutely. Always a privilege to play with him and with Noah and with all you guys. It was a really good time.
Yeah, big appreciation to Noah, to Scott, to John, and always to Mason for making all this kind of stuff possible. All y'all make my dreams come true, and that goes for all of my players, all of Mason's players. I know we get to create because y'all decide that y'all want to trust us with your stories. So thank you so much.
You're all beautiful people.
Keep going.
And watch out for dungeons out there.
All right. Go play on the internet. Love your face. See you later, man.
Will do. See ya, dude.
I'm all alone. There's no one to stand above me. Oops.
Okay.
Right there in the middle of that conversation, it just started popping off like fireworks.
Well, that all sounds very nice to me, dear.
That's because you too are into murder.
This is true. I have an affinity for it.
As long as it's a good story.
One day, it will get me into trouble with the law. But until then, we're all good.
Until then, you're wanted, dead or alive. Enemies to hit. Ow, sorry, I got an itch on my nose, and yeah, when that hits, man, oh, nothing else is important anywhere ever.
Yeah, seriously, though.
The whole world stops for a nose itch. All right.
Guys texted yesterday and was like, I've tested positive. You should all go get tested.
COVID is the new STD. Like,
seriously.
Except seriously. you can catch it from across the table and without ever high-fiving. They take your money and your breath away. It's not good.
Yeah, exactly. And not in the way that leads to you burning when you pee, right? Like, not that taking your breath away.